Is history something we study, or is it something we live? Well, what if the answer to that is, yeah, you got it, yes. History is something we study, but it is also something that we live out. Now, many of you, my story is that let's just say I was not really engaged during a lot of years of school. And so I look back today and I really wish that I had spent more time with history. I know that some of you are history buffs and you've got all that information in your head. It just never really stayed in my head very well. And maybe that's because I just was not really told. I was not taught what the importance of history is. And today I see that that old cliche, those that do not know history are destined to repeat it. And that goes back to the original question. Is history something that we study or something that we live out? The answer is yes. In this Torah portion, we get to Parashah 6, and it is translated history or generations. It's the word toldot, and of course, please excuse my southern brand of very bad Hebrew. But let's look at that word for just a moment and consider, again, my first thought. Is history something that we study or something we live out? If you want to, and I really challenge you, someone emailed me, texted me, instant message, sent a carrier pigeon, I'm not quite sure right now. Somebody said to me the other day that I'm using a little bit more of the Hebrew words, just a few here and there. But it wasn't something that I walked into this year really planning to do. It's just there's certain words that are intriguing me, and so I'm sharing those with you. And so I looked at this word, toldot. And if you don't have to know Hebrew, as I was just recording with Barry, you can go to Blue Letter Bible, various programs, and you can get some very simple, basic things of Hebrew. Be careful that you don't make something into a doctrine, that is going to split people. But it's there's some intriguing things that happen here. And one of them is with this word. It is the letters of the word is a tav, a vav, a lamed, a dalet, a vav, and a tav. So we have the tav and the vav on both ends of the word, and then we see the lamed and the dalet here in the center of it. Consider that. Let's just look at the pictograms for the letters here. The tav is a sign or a mark. It is considered the letter of the covenant. And so this is going to set the stage for what this word is. So we have something that on one side is about the covenant. On the other side is the covenant. The vav is the connector. And so the picture that's being formed here is the covenant over here, the covenant here is being connected by what is in the center of the word. And there is a lamed, which is the tallest letter. It's a letter that goes up. It's kind of shaped like this. It is known as the letter of the king, Melech, the letter of the king, or the shepherd's staff, that one who is the shepherd of the sheep in the field. I would look at that as Messiah, specifically Messiah ben David, okay, Messiah, the son of David. And then we have this letter of the dalet, which is about a tent door. If we enclose this, we would have the letter He, but here we have the letter dalet, about a tent door. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that we have covenant. In the center is the one of the covenant, the Messiah, the one of the king, and a door to the king. We'll go to the Gospels, and Yeshua says, I am the door. He also talks about being the shepherd, the good shepherd. Now, let's take the whole picture here. The center is about him. Let's see, what is the word in English? History, his story. He is the center of everything of history. And then we have those of the past that were walking in the mark of the covenant, were connecting themselves to the king, entering into the door of the kingdom because they were connected to the covenant. And then those that are in the future that are connected because of the covenant, they are connected to and entering in the door of the kingdom. So in this word, what are we seeing? Is history something we study, or is it something that we live? And the answer is absolutely yes. In the end, it will be like one big parade. It will be like looking at a parade, not from the a street corner where you see in order to see the past, you have to go forward. Okay, imagine a parade going down a street, and it's coming by you, and you're seeing the present. But in order to see the past, you would have to go forward into someone else's present to see what is your past. And to go to your future, you would have to go into someone's present back this way. But if you were in the Goodyear blimp and you were looking down upon it, what would you see? You would see your story, his story. You would see the parade being brought forth, but it would all be in the present. That's a picture. Some amazing picture of what we look at when we see this scripture all the way from Genesis, Bereshit, Adam and Eve, Adam and Hava, as they began this process of entering into the kingdom through the acceptance of the covenant of the king. And we see it all the way over into Revelation when we see those who will enter into the covenant of the king, and everything in between is all about the same thing, and it's all about his story. So you and I are the same as Abraham, Isaac, Yaakov, Ishmael, Esau. All of these people are walking out his story. We get to look at the end, we get to look at the beginning, but we also get to walk out our part of the story. All right, with that being said, Isaac is 40 years old. He now has a bride. He's got Rivka. And, well, after a little while, they figure out, here's another example of a barren woman. And this happened with Mama. Isaac is kind of thinking about the stories that are maybe going on in his own mind of that Abraham told him about how Sarah was barren. And, well, here we go again with the same thing. So what does he do? As opposed to Hannah, and I guess we could go into quite a bit of teaching here. I'm not going to do that today. I'll let you kind of work on it yourself. That Hannah, we see at the time at Shiloh with Eli the priest, she goes and prays for herself, and she becomes pregnant. But with this, we see that Isaac, he prays for Rivka, and she becomes pregnant. Well, why is it? There's a lot of speculation here, but why is it that he prays? Again, I don't want to really go into that, but he prays for her, and I guess he prayed very, very well, because she didn't just, she doesn't just have one child. He prayed twins into the thing. And her first response, the first thing that we hear from her is the children are fighting with each other inside her so much that she says, here's her first words, if it's going to be like this, why keep on living? Now, I mean, maybe some of you ladies have had twins. I met someone at a restaurant the other night. We were in Colorado spending some time with our daughter and son-in-law and grandchildren. We actually went out to a restaurant, and one of our grandkids was, he's like 2 years old, something like that. And the waiter that was there said he had twin 1-year-olds. It's like, you need prayer. But this, I cannot imagine what it would be like to have twins, okay? Way beyond. But to have twins that are fighting to the point that you say, there's no reason for me to just keep on living here. When I read this morning specifically, I go back over this. I usually kind of spend some time during the week thinking about the next Torah portion, and then really start looking at it. And I read these words, and it was like they were highlighted on the page. Because today, make no mistake, I recorded with Barry just a little while ago, what is happening in our world today, for those that do not have really any spiritual insights, and I have to say that that number is multiplying, probably increasing dramatically in our day. That most people don't really spend much time, and in fact, what's tragic is that this statement is not just about those that are living a secular life, but it's those that are so-called Christian, even Messianics, that though they somewhere in their mind they think that there's, no, they're not even considering that there's more of a spiritual battle that's going on around us than there is a natural battle. That the natural battle that's happening today is just a mirror image of what is happening in the spirit. If you're not seeing that, you're going to miss what is happening. The spirit realm is being mirrored into the natural realm, not vice versa. What is going on with these two children, with Jacob and Esau, is a spiritual realm fight that is being manifested in the natural realm through these two boys in the womb of Rivka. No wonder, she said, if it's going to be like this, why keep on living? Now, is anyone, do those words kind of resonate with anyone today? If it's going to continue like this, and what we've had to deal with in 2020, is there really any point? Is there really any point to it all? Why not let's just, your kingdom come, like this afternoon. Let's wrap it all up. I'm all for that. But my timing is not his timing, thank him. There is something that still needs to be worked out, there's a point of there's a section of history that still must be before getting to where we should all desire to go, and that is something that we're being called to walk out. with Rivka, she's seeing the manifestation of the fight for the covenant. That hasn't changed. We're still seeing the fight for the covenant. Now, she says, so she went to inquire of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. What did she do? She did the same thing that you and I are called to do today. Matthew chapter 24, other places we could go to in Scripture, specifically in Matthew. When you see these things begin to happen, look up, for your redemption is drawing near. She could have gone, she could have gone to Isaac. I guess that would have been a good thing. Maybe she's kind of blaming him for this, I don't know. But she went to the Creator and she inquired of him. She felt the struggle that is going on inside of her. So she went to the Creator to inquire, to look up unto him, and she got the answer. It's a spiritual problem that you're involved in because you're in the natural realm working out the manifestation of the spiritual realm. Folks, things haven't changed. Things have not changed one bit between then and now. And we see the birth of Yaakov, or of Jacob and Esau, and the fight that happened there. And in this, Christianity, because of not understanding the traditions, not understanding the culture. I mean, I taught this, that Jacob was the supplanter, and yes, that's what his name means, but it's not really the essence of his name, is that he was protecting himself from Esau, who is trying to put his heel, go back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. We see that verse spoken to the serpent of, you will bruise his heel. We see this struggle happening over the covenant during the birth of these two boys. They come on the scene. We see that Esau is the older. And then, and I'm not going to go into that a lot because it's been taught on so much, but then we see the stew and the selling of the birthright, not the stealing, not the supplanting, but it comes down to this, that Esau did not care about the covenant. This is about a covenant meal that Esau would have been responsible for as the one in line for the Melchizedek priesthood, the priesthood of the family, which is what the fight's all about to begin with, and from beginning to end of Scripture is the Melchizedek priesthood, Yeshua being after the order of Melchizedek. And so Esau is given the charge to carry on some of the traditions having to do with the establishing of the covenant. He didn't do that. So what happened is that Isaac took on that responsibility, and because he cared for the covenant, he was able to receive and enter into the covenant, whereas Esau did not. So it was not stolen from Esau, it was bought legally. This would have been a legal contract that could have been drawn up in that day, and it basically would have said, Esau, because you're the firstborn, you have the right to the covenant, but I would like to have it. Would you sell it to me? Here's the terms. One covenant, one bowl of stew. Okay, Esau signs it off, grabs his fork, and it's all over with. Moving on. But then Esau figures out what he did. See, here's Esau's problem, is that he's more concerned with the natural realm and his own desires than he is about the spiritual realm and the desires of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. We'll see that played out a little bit later on. Next thing we see is that there is a famine in the land. Not as the time, not the same as the famine that took place when Abraham was alive. And so Adonai appeared to Yaakov and said, don't go down to Egypt, but live where I tell you. Stay in this land, and I will be with you and bless you, because I will give all these lands to you and your descendants. And it goes on from there. A famine came forth in the time of Abraham, when we go back to Genesis chapter 12 on this one. And so Abraham goes to Egypt. Well, here we have the patterns are the same, in that Abraham has a wife who's barren, who later gives birth. And so Isaac is kind of following the patterns with Rivkah. And so a famine comes in the land. Well, Dad went down to Egypt. I guess that's kind of what our family does. Except for, as this is being thought of in his mind, it says that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh comes to him and says, don't do what your father did. You're to stay in the land in the midst of the famine. Here's a point of wisdom that we must grab a hold of today. There are probably times that, we see what happened in Egypt, okay? We end up with Hagar, we end up with Ishmael. Didn't really work out very well. But the natural tendency of this family is that when there is a famine, and I'm not just talking about a famine for food, famine can be various things. When there's a famine, the tendency is to go back to Egypt. So let's say that, as I did, I grew up in church, I was a pastor. Things changed in about 1998 when I took what I call a life-defining trip to Israel. And so I moved forward into the Torah. Folks, in 20-something years that I've been in this walk, it's not all just total excitement. There's times that you open the Word and it's like, wow, it's kind of a famine. But what do you do in those times? Do you go back? Do you go back where you were and say, well, I guess that I just don't have the feelings that I used to. I don't have the warm fuzzies and the goosebumps and all of those things and the wow moments and whatever else, right? There's times you just got to walk it by yourself, and it feels a little lonely. It feels a little dry. It feels a little barren. It feels a little like a famine. But are you going to go back to Egypt? Or are you going to stay in the place of the covenant? This is what is being spoken to Isaac in these words. And in verse 5, very interesting, it says, all of this because Abraham heeded what I said and did what I told him to do. He followed my mitzvot, my instructions, my regulations, and David Stern translates it, and my teachings. But the word here is the word Torah. Torah. This is the first time that the word Torah is used in Scripture. I guess that there would be, those that would ask, well, he's living out the words of history that are being recorded But yet, at the same time that Abraham was living them out, he was also living them. His walk would be about what would be written later. This is, in my brain, it goes a lot of different places that I can't get to actually give you the wording on, but I just find it fascinating that he was living what he was living. So the Torah did not come about on Mount Sinai. The Torah already was. The Torah became flesh and dwelt among us. The Torah that already was. So for those that would say, well, what about Messiah? Well, Abraham was following the living Torah before the living Torah was manifested as the living Torah. That's why he was able to walk in faith, and that we are to walk that same faith. The faith of our father Abraham is because he was walking the same walk that we're walking, but yet we have a little bit greater understanding of areas, but I would question the possibility that he had some understanding that maybe we don't have today. But as we all keep walking, the fullness of the revelation of the Torah will be revealed before us. Now, Isaac begins to, in the midst of that, through this, he goes back and starts to do something that is, I think we need to look at today. The Philistines. Who are the Philistines? The Philistines are the ones that they are in possession of much of the land of the day. We will see the Philistines coming forth in various places. We will see the problems that happen because Israel never truly kicked the Philistines out. And, well, Philistine, Palestinian, maybe there's some commonality there. What do you think? That if you don't kick the enemies of the covenant out of the land, you'll keep fighting them, which means history will repeat itself for those who failed to learn from it in the first place. The Philistines in that day had stopped up the wells of Abraham. Now, this in itself is a little on the side of stupid. There is an aquifer under the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, and it is a shared aquifer. It's huge, from what I've been told of those that have done the soundings of it. And so the Philistines, they need water. Why not just get water from the wells that Abraham had dug and kind of supplant possession of them? Instead, what are they doing? They're trying to wipe out the history of Abraham in the land. I told you, look at what's happening today. What are the Palestinians doing? Trying to wipe out the history of Abraham, Isaac, Yaakov, David. What are the excavators doing? When they find something, a new excavation, it's like put up a parking lot and you find the city of David, or think about putting in a parking lot and all of a sudden you start digging and wow, there's the city of David. The excavators, those that are going over and doing the digging, what are they doing? They're unstopping the wells. They're unstopping the wells of Abraham. They're revealing the history of the covenant in the land. So Isaac goes around and he begins to unstop the wells of the Philistines. As soon as he does, we see that the Philistines, there begins to be quarrels over these wells. Well, these are actually ours. No, this didn't really happen there. These are actually our wells, and it wasn't actually your father that was here. It was someone that looked like him. Okay? Again, history repeating itself. So there's a battle. Anytime that you begin to redig, unstop the wells of our father Abraham, there'll be a battle. I mean, has anybody, does that resonate with anyone? You go back and you begin to unstop the wells of the Torah. How do you stop up those wells anyway? I'll give you a quick example. The book of Leviticus chapter 11, tells us what is clean and what is unclean. And if you do not eat that which is unclean, but you eat that which is clean, what do? The living water of the Torah flows into your life. But yet, because of Peter's vision, misinterpretation of that totally, and other things that have happened, traditions of man, well, we're going to stop that one up. So Leviticus chapter 11 doesn't really matter anymore. We can eat anything that we want, and the well of the living water is stopped up. So when you go back and you read Leviticus 11, then you go to Peter's vision and say, that had nothing to do with what I eat today, and everything is sanctified by the word and prayer, not just your prayer, because your prayer doesn't change the word. You can pray over a mop all day, doesn't make it food in my book. Okay, you invite me over to Thanksgiving dinner and serve me a dirty mop that you just mop the floor with. Don't expect me to just pray over that thing and then start chewing, because it's dirty, it's unclean. So what happens when you start to unstop those wells? Your relatives start to quarrel. No, the Torah's done away with. No, look at these verses. Look at this. And it begins a quarrel. You know what you got to do? Just keep digging. Keep digging, because eventually you're going to find that you're going to come to your own well. And this is the key to the whole picture here. This is the key to it. It's in verse 25, and it says that he went to Beersheba. Adonai appeared to him that same night, said, I am the Elohim of Abraham your father. Don't be afraid, because I'm with you. I will bless you and increase your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. And he built an altar and called on the name of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He pitched his tent there, and there Yitzhak's servants dug a well. They didn't just unstop the other wells. Okay, they unstopped those wells, yes. But there is quarreling over those wells. So what do? They kept digging. Kept going to a next well, until they come to the place in Beersheba where Yitzhak is able to dig his own well. Now remember, the aquifer that is running under all of Israel is running under all of Israel. That means that the aquifer, the well that Isaac dug, is dug into the same aquifer as his father's wells. It's the same water that's connected. It's the same Torah coming forth, but this one he owns. There comes a time that you need to dig your own well. There comes a time in which it's not that you quit drinking of the water of maybe your teachers. I said to our son Daniel years ago, he was working at a Christian camp. And the first year that he came back, it was the camp actually that Camp Yeshua is at. In the first year he came back, and he had been, he didn't really he wasn't really raised in church from the time that he could remember. Everything that he remembered, everything in his memory banks was on a more Hebraic scale. And so this was the first time that he was confronted with a basic Christian theology of, those things are done away with. And he spent the summer there, came back confused, yeah. Came back questioning, yeah. I was okay with that. I said, at some point in time, you have to own this. He asked me what I meant. I said, this is the verses right here that I get that statement from. That at some point you have to own it. You can drink from your father's wells only so long. Yes, it's the same water, but it's a well that someone else dug. At some point, you need to dig your own well. You need to own the well that the water is coming forth from. Question: are you relying on wells other people have dug to get you through? There's nothing wrong with, this is what I'm doing. I'm sharing to you from my well. I'm sharing everything that I share with. I don't use commentaries. Okay, those are other people's wells. Occasionally I'll open one and look at some things. Yeah, I'm not opposed to that, okay? I'll go to someone else's well, but I've got to own it. It's got to be mine. Many people will spend their whole life drinking only out of other people's wells and never dig their own well. Which means that when the Philistines arise, you may and may not fight over the well, because it's not a well that you own. So you might just, go, you can have that well. You can have that well back. Because when you read Leviticus chapter 11, it's not your conviction. It's what Mike said. Because Mike dug the well out of Leviticus 11 for himself and then shared with me some of the water. But it's his well. And so when, you go to Thanksgiving dinner and your mother or your mother-in-law or something decides that we decided that, we're going to change over and have ham this year. And you say, I guess there's nothing really wrong with that in the end. I'll ask forgiveness tomorrow. Because you didn't own the well. But when you've dug your own well, you'll fight for it. You'll fight for the well that you, through your own blood, sweat, and tears, dug. Dig your own wells. Now we see in chapter 27 the fight, Jacob and Esau. This is the fight for the Melchizedek priesthood. I'm not going to go into that. Eddie Chumney has some excellent teachings on the Melchizedek priesthood. But this literally is the fight of the heavens. Okay, just to put it in some simple terms here. The fight of the heavens from the beginning to the end is for the Melchizedek priesthood, a spiritual realm priesthood that will be walked out in the natural realm. This is why you and I are called after the order of Melchizedek. That does not mean that the Levitical priesthood is done away with. Let's take a quick look. The Melchizedek priesthood is very, very complicated in many ways, much more than I even understand or anybody else, okay? We could see that the Levitical priesthood is pointing us to the Melchizedek priesthood, and that the Levitical priesthood is a breaking down into a little bit more common denominator. Look at it like this. That I've got one of our grandsons is 9 years old. I would not give him a $20 bill just, when he was 5, maybe today he would understand it a little bit more. But, when he was 3, 4 years old, you don't hand a 4-year-old a $20 bill unless you're not a real bright parent, okay? Yeah, that's happening. What do? You teach them the value. Used to, you could teach them the value of a penny. Now it has no value. You would teach them the value of a penny, a nickel, a dime, a quarter, a dollar bill, 5, 10, until they're able to comprehend the value of the $20 bill. To me, and this is just my opinion, the Levitical priesthood is like a breaking down into a smaller denominational values, the Melchizedek, so that it makes it easier for us to understand what is going on in that realm. The $20 bill does not do away with the dime. In fact, you cannot understand the $20 bill if you don't understand the dime. So if the Levitical priesthood is done away with, then there's no way for us to truly understand what the Melchizedek priesthood is all about. It's about the establishment of the covenant, and this is the battle that was going on between Cain and Abel. This is the battle that is going on, that went on between Isaac and Ishmael. It's the battle going on between Jacob and Esau. It's the battle that will be going on in the 12 tribes when we get to Joseph. Joseph's dream is about the Melchizedek priesthood. And so in the end, the priesthood is then broken up into the tribes and then is brought back together in Messiah. Hope you got, that's just a very, very that's not quite scratching the surface thought of that, okay? Let's move on. After the blessing is given, then Esau wept aloud, and Esau, his father, answered him. And he's asking about a blessing. Okay, and Barry Phillips has got a lot of teaching on the differences in the blessing. I'm not going to go into that. It says, and this is how David Stern translates it: your home will be of the riches of the earth, the dew of the heaven from above. But the wording in Hebrew, it's not what it says. In Hebrew, it says, your home will be away from the riches of the earth and away from the dew of the the dew of heaven from above. Esau began his life striving after the natural realm. he had wrong focus. Because he was striving after the natural realm, he would never be able to enjoy the benefits of the natural realm. Whereas Isaac, his focus was on the spiritual realm, which allowed him to enjoy the benefits of the natural realm. You and I will never truly enter into the enjoyment and benefit of the natural realm when we focus on it. When we focus on the spiritual realm, the natural realm then has meaning. The spiritual realm does not disconnect us from the natural realm. In fact, the spiritual realm focus should provide a greater connection with the natural realm of this earth. I'll give you something to think about on your own a little bit later on. It says, you will live by the sword, you will serve your brother, but when you break loose, you will shake his yoke off your neck. This is not a yoke of as what we would consider that the yoke is that Esau refuses to submit to the covenant in the spiritual realm. The greatest example of this in the time I have is here. That I met a man years ago. He had actually been a bodyguard for Yasser Arafat. May he be judged. Okay, and he was in the United States. He'd been talking with someone, and the guy had so much anger in his life. I mean, just angry at everything. And finally, this other person said, "You know, you'll never have peace until you learn to love a Jew." Well, I mean, he was raised with the PLO. He was taught to hate the Jews, which included Yeshua. And this man was saying to him, you'll never have peace until you learn to love a Jew, specifically a Jew named Yeshua. And that took his anger to a whole new level that he had never experienced before, and became a yoke of bondage unto him, until one day he submitted himself to a Jew named Yeshua. And in that day, the sword that he had lived by all of his life was beaten into a plowshare in his own life. I met this man. I had dinner with this man. You could see that, I mean, you wouldn't want him to be mad at you. He was one of the most peaceful men that I ever knew, that I've ever met. Why? Because he had thrown off the bondage of the yoke of the sword and had received peace in Messiah. We need to do the same today, folks. What we see happening around us in this world, it's the battle for the covenant, and we have a choice. We can either live by the sword of anger toward what's going on, or live by the shalom, the peace that the Father is desiring to bring us. Yeshua said it, my peace, my shalom, I give unto you. Shavua Tov. Have a blessed, prosperous week. But before next week, you'll be sitting down with Thanksgiving. So for those of you that are celebrating that time, I pray it is an amazing time for you. And there goes my timer. A time of celebrating and giving thanks with those that are important to us. Shavua Tov. Blessed, prosperous week. Bezrat Hashem. See you again next week. And until then, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.